Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the regular meeting of the Alexander Board of Education. Aaron, if you would do our roll call, please.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Yedis? Mr. Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes?
Yes.
And Mr. Collins?
Yes.
If everyone would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, would entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
So move. Second.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Yedis? Mr. Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Okay. Before we do public participation, we have made arrangements to have Jack Pepper on the line with us. So if we can give Jack a call. I've had phone conference with him, with Mrs. Douglas, the week before Thanksgiving. We've also had another phone conference last week. So it's been a while since we've had Jack officially talk to us. And with all that's going on with the holidays and coming out of Thanksgiving, we asked him to make himself available, and he graciously accepted. So if you'll bear with us for just a second until we can get Jack on the line, we're going to talk to him first, and then we'll move on. Just, can you just shoot him a text?
Yeah, I will.
Okay.
Okay, he said great. Now I got him. Okay. Hopefully he has service. Hi, Jack. I'm going to put you on speakerphone with Mr. Barnes. Okay, thank you.
Is that your speaker? Yep. Okay. Jack, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you well.
Okay. Thanks for joining us and taking the time out. I know you and I have spoke a couple of different times within the past 2 to 3 weeks, and understanding all the meetings and all the phone conferences that you deal with on a daily basis, I certainly appreciate you taking the time this evening and talking with us.
Happy to do it.
If I could start, can you give us just, I guess, a brief summary of where we stand now with cases and what the health department is seeing?
Sure. So why don't I talk a little bit about our decision-making process, just in general, about when we, how we're arriving at some of the decisions that we're making, and included in that is our current case count. Is that fair?
That's fair. Yes.
So there are really 5 things that we kind of take a look at, that we monitor on a daily basis, sometimes and often more frequently than that. The first one that we take a look at is of course our case count, and where that's trending, whether it's trending upward or downward, and then what sort of events that might be happening in the local community that could be impacting that case count. So I'll use last week as an example. Last week, a couple of times we touched above 60 cases per day. That, of course, was a new record for us. And it really wasn't entirely shocking because we had been on a fairly steady upward trend in the county for the previous couple of weeks. And then we held a testing event at the fairgrounds where we saw 640 people. So we sort of anticipated that we would see an influx in positive cases because we were able to get a lot more people tested. And so that event, we saw 638 people, 51 tested positive. And so the percentages sort of add up. Right now, there's a positivity rate in the state, generally speaking, of about 12 to 15%. And that's almost exactly what we saw, just a little bit shy, but sort of what we saw at our testing events. So we sort of anticipated that, we would see an influx of positivity that week here locally. The really good news, if there's good news to be had right now, is that we have seen a bit of a drop off in the last few days, and I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but we've been in the mid-20s pretty consistently for the last 3 days. So that's all really good news, and that's sort of the trend that we're seeing currently. Is we were definitely having an upward trend for about 3 weeks until last week when we peaked at 63 cases. I think we hit 63 actually a couple of times over about a 4-day period. And then in more recent days, we've seen a declining trend where we're in the mid 20s. And I can't, if I had a crystal ball to speculate why exactly that was happening, I could do pretty well at the moment in forecasting futures, but we at this point could attribute it to a few different things. One is that we may be coming off of the Thanksgiving holiday where we know that people were gathering and there may have been some increased spread of disease there. It could be the result of a testing mechanism. Maybe folks have transitioned where they're spending some of their ancillary cash into the holiday instead of paying for antigen testing. So we're not really sure exactly why we're seeing that downward trend, but the good news is that we are seeing a little bit of a downward trend over the last 3 or 4 days. One of the other metrics that we look at is what's happening with our local health system. We meet twice a week privately with the leadership at Oblenis Ohio Health, and we get a status report from them. And the good news that we continue to hear from those folks is that they feel very confident in their ability to manage the sick folks that are showing up at their doorstep. So that certainly is something that we consider and weigh heavily, and I'm happy to continue to report that they feel very confident in their ability to keep up. Does that mean that they're not operating at a very high capacity rate by normal standards? I think that that's probably a true statement, but they're not operating in a way that would be in excess of what sort of the normal operations for the hospital this time of year might look like. So we continue to have those conversations with them. The trend, again, 3 weeks ago, much like our increased case count, was that we did see the hospitalization numbers increasing, which was a cause for concern for us. But in the last 2 or 3 meetings that we've had with them over the last 7 to 10 days, things have plateaued and become more manageable for them. So that also is really good news. The third thing we sort of take a look at is what's going on with all of the different districts in the county and absenteeism. So are we seeing pockets of absenteeism in all the districts? Is everybody having high rates of absenteeism at once? And collectively, over the last 3 or 4 months, what we've seen is, quite frankly, not a lot of absenteeism in all of our districts. And when we have had some absenteeism, it's been identified in particular pockets of the county. It hasn't been, everybody all at once. We certainly pay attention to what's going on in our neighboring counties. And then the last thing that we sort of take a look at is what is the governor telling us? What is the Ohio Department of Health telling us? And when we weigh those 5 things together, Dr. Gaskell, who's the health commissioner, ultimately makes the call as to what our recommendations are going to look like, if there are any. But those are sort of the metrics just to give you guys an idea as to where we've evolved since perhaps the last time we chatted, because it's all changing so quickly, as to, how we're making decisions about what is in the best interest of the kids that are attending school here in Athens County.
Okay, if I may, Jack, I'm going to put you on the spot on a couple
Sure.
of questions. And you've answered this to me before, but I just want to see if anything has changed. So first, there seems to be a lot of confusion, and I certainly get questions regarding, well, the health department recommended this, and the health department says you should do this. Can you state whether you've given a recommendation to the schools?
We have not. Currently, and what I mean we have not issued a county-wide level recommendation that says that kids should be in this particular modality. We do work with each of the districts individually, and currently we're in a position where we feel like we can continue to manage, what's best for each individual district on a case-by-case scenario. I can assure you that if we had made a forward-facing public recommendation about a modality or extracurriculars, that you would have seen it all over the news media. And to date, we just haven't. We've been able to manage, each of the districts individually, and have been able to support the decisions or proposals of each of those districts individually as well.
Yeah, I think the words, Jack, that you told me is that you would support each individual school district's choice to whether to go remote, stay in person. Is that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement, and that's still the statement. Now, Jay, you and I have talked, and there may come a time, depending on those 5 things that I just outlined, where Dr. Gaskell determines that it's appropriate for us to make a recommendation to pursue or transition to a particular modality. But to date, we have not reached that particular point yet. We are still continuing to support each of the districts with data and information and our expertise and helping them make decisions that are in the best interest of each of the individual districts.
And one more thing, a question, or I guess a statement that I'd like you to just to confirm is, I've heard Superintendent Douglas say that she has meetings with you, I think every Wednesday. Is that's with all 5 of our school districts in the county, the superintendents?
Yep. So we do have a weekly call. Any of the district leadership are invited to attend, and that doesn't include just the 5 districts that everyone is familiar with. It includes the ESC. It includes the Board of Developmental Disabilities. It includes Hogland Center, Learning Center in Albany. So any of the districts in the county that have leadership positions, they're all invited to attend that meeting.
Okay, and those have been happening weekly for
months.
Months. Okay.
Yeah, for months. Yeah.
Okay. Those were my questions. I'm going to turn it over to the other members that will have questions for you. Thanks, Jack.
Sure. Yep.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me, Jack, or do I have to go over there?
Can you hear Blake, Jack, at all?
I can't. He's very muffled.
Instead of passing the phone, just come down. I'll switch places.
Hey Jack, how are you?
I'm well. How about you?
It's another beautiful day in the neighborhood.
I hear you.
In previous conversations, we've talked about where the health department has seen actual spread within our community and within our schools.
Yep.
Can you elaborate on that so everybody can hear that for themselves?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So we do track all the school numbers. We have weekly, we're required to report those numbers to the Ohio Department of Health, and that populates the state dashboard. We also have points of contact with all the different districts, including the superintendent. So it's not uncommon for me to speak to wellness coordinators, school nurses, and the superintendents with some regularity. And quite frankly, what we've seen is we've seen pretty limited spread in the actual school environment itself. So when you talk about the actual, 8:30 to 2:30 school day, in those settings, we've seen not much in the way of spread in those environments. What we have seen is of course we have had some staff and students who have been sick, but under most circumstances, we're able to trace that back to another event, whatever that event is. It's typically not happening in the schools. And quite frankly, we've done a lot of quarantining at this point, and what we've seen is that we're not seeing a lot of the folks that we're quarantining transitioning to being positive unless it's a family unit. So we are seeing some of that transition in family households, but typically, we've seen very little transmission in the actual school setting itself. It's fair to talk about extracurriculars, and certainly we've seen more spread in those environments than in the school environment. But honestly, again, it's very limited. We do have some isolated examples of where we've had some issues. But all things considered, when you take a bigger picture look at what's happening in the community, I would not say that school activities ranks very high in terms of where we're seeing the spread. And the data supports that. I mean, we have hard numbers that indicate that.
Thank you. And just because the whatever you want to say, the standards or guidelines change pretty regularly.
Yep.
What is the current process for determining quarantines within the school? Because it is
So
broad.
it just changed. It just changed actually probably about 10 days ago. The CDC modified its guidance. It didn't really change its guidance, just modified its guidance based on the data that they're seeing as a result of now being able to collect some data now that the disease has been around a little bit longer. And so what they did is they did minimize, or they did allow for a shorter quarantine period, 10 days, if you are not showing any signs or symptoms of disease at that 10th day. So the gold standard is still 14 days. If you look at the CDC guidance, the gold standard is still a 14-day quarantine period. But because that has been so challenging and devastating for certain work sectors, and as they've learned more, they've scaled back the quarantine guidelines to a 10-day timeline with those additional 3 or 4 days up to 14 days. You have to do some self-monitoring. So at 10 days, as long as you're not presenting with any symptoms, not sick, self-monitor for the next 3 or 4 days. I think it's 4, which would put you at 14 days. But you are able to return back to normal activity after that 10th day, as long as you sort of commit to continuing to keep track of yourself and how you're feeling for an additional 4 days.
And the school's helping out with that, right? That process?
Yeah, the schools are very involved at this point. To be totally honest, as we've now transitioned into a new phase of the pandemic, where we saw sort of this dramatic increase in cases, and now that we're also doing vaccination planning, our ability at the health department to actually do a lot of this contact tracing and quarantine work has diminished. It's not because we don't want to. It really is just a reflection of, there's only so many of us and so many hours in the day. We're all working, holidays, 7 days a week we're there. Most of us are there for 10 to 12 hours a day. And so something had to give. So we've done a lot of training and work with the school districts, and are really tickled with the relationship that we've been able to establish with those folks, the wellness coordinators, the superintendent, the administrative staff, the nurses, and they're helping us with that quarantine piece. And yes, we're still involved, but they are doing a lion's share of the work on our behalf, and we're grateful for that relationship.
Awesome. I have one more thing, and I'm kind of forgetting it here. I gotta go look at my notes and let Lucy take over.
Okay.
Thank you, Jared.
You bet.
I forgot. I got it. Now, on that quarantine process with the what are some of the practices or actions, behaviors that you would recommend somebody take it upon themselves to be self-quarantined? And then I'm going to walk away and
Okay.
let you answer that, so I don't answer another one.
Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll just talk generally. The governor last week established 12 protocols, 21 days of Stay Safe Ohio. And I think that those protocols are really what we should be looking at in terms of guidance for how we can best stay safe over the next 21 days, really trying to get through the Christmas and New Year holiday. Of course, continuing to practice all of those public health safety measures that we've been talking about for months now, which is, wearing your mask and, socially distancing 6 feet, stay home from work if you don't feel well, self-isolate if you believe that that you are sick. Those are all still in place. It's important to reiterate that the 10 o'clock curfew order is still in place and has been extended through the holiday season. So those are all really great ways to continue to stay safe and to continue to try to prevent the continued spread of disease. We really have arrived at a place where we're just trying to, quite frankly, individually stay healthy, because the disease is certainly, it's everywhere at this point. So really any of those safety measures or those precautions that you're taking are, about your choice to stay healthy, because if you literally, go into an environment or a space where there are lots of people, you certainly could potentially be exposing yourself to disease.
Okay. Hey, Jack, this is Lucy Yedis. How are you?
I'm good.
Good. I had a few questions. I want to make sure I heard you right. So from what you're saying about extracurricular school-sponsored activities, you're not seeing right now any reason for the health department to worry?
We are not. I mean, we certainly are paying attention, but we are not seeing any significant amount of spread that would, require an action from us. Because quite frankly, if we had arrived at that place, that action would have taken place. I mean, we have these conversations multiple times a day. I mean, we have a morning meeting as a staff, an entire staff. This is certainly a topic that we talk about every single day. And then, we also have a hot wash at the end of the day with the entire staff, where we talk about, what were the activities of the day, what were the trends, what did we see? And again, we are certainly want to make sure that we make the best public health decision in the best interest of the kids. And to date, we just have not seen the kind of spread. And quite frankly, we've been lucky. If you'd asked me 3 months ago if I thought we would have made it this far and not seen more spread, I would have told you the wrong thing. But at this point, we really just have not seen a ton of spread in those extracurricular activities.
Okay, thank you. What are your worries about, what are your thoughts about Christmas and New Year's?
We're
It's the
terribly
biggest time
concerned
of
about
year.
that.
Yeah.
So we are, I think, as humans, we're social people. I think it's incredibly hard to stay away from, in particular, family, extended family. We've been at this for a long time. And so I think that it certainly is concerning that, people will let down their guard, that they might make choices that land them in a place where they're exposed to disease, and God forbid that they get sick. But I think that that's a real reality. So, we're continuing to pound our social media pages and the media with the messaging about making choices that are going to keep everybody safe over the next 21 to 28 days. And only time will tell. But the choice really is our choice as people. We can have some influence and impact, if we choose to make the really hard choices to, maybe not spend Christmas with at large family gatherings.
And my third question, I did some numbers based on the number of cases that you've shared with Lindy and she shared with us when I asked recently about it.
Uh-huh.
Cases in zip codes that have Alexander students, and I separated out Athens.
Mhm.
And when I looked at the numbers for Albany, New Marshfield, and Shade,
Mhm.
and these are just COVID cases in those areas. At
Yep.
the end of October, there was, what was it, 117? And at the end of November, there was 338 cases. No,
Yep.
for those, it was 16 and 70 for those three places, and that's our district. That's 4 times, so that's what has me worried about people getting together over Christmas and New Year's.
It is a significant concern. I mean, it is, you are correct in your assessment that we've seen a steady increase in case count over the last 45 days. A steady, a steady rise in cases, and we of course are paying very, very close attention to that. And if you asked me if we were basing any recommendations that we made exclusively on case count alone, we probably would have made a recommendation at this point. But when you weigh those other 4 factors into the decision-making process, we're just not quite there yet. Because we, one thing we have heard is that from our teacher friends and administrators and the students themselves, is that they learn best in person for sure. That may not be the safest way right now, but that certainly seems to be the resounding information that we're hearing is that everybody sort of is recognizing at this point that the learning process is best accomplished with people in person. So we're doing everything we can in terms of evaluating all of the data and making sure that when we do make a recommendation, if we arrive at that place that we should all button down and stay home and do the virtual thing, that it really is the right decision, that the timing is right, that we really are left with no other options.
Okay, thank you. I
Mhm.
appreciate your time.
Yep.
No, I'm fine.
Jack, I think everyone has asked their questions of you. Again,
Okay.
I appreciate you taking the time and all the work that you do with the school district, because it's ever-changing landscape hour by hour. So
It
again,
is.
thank you. And if you would, just confirm that the health department will make a recommendation if it's called for.
You can count on that for sure.
Okay.
Okay?
Just a second. Yeah, Josh is referring to the phone conference we had, and that
Yep.
you said the health department, if they move to that stance of making a formal recommendation, you'll give us notice. It's not going to
Yes,
be
you
all
will,
of a
you will
sudden.
all get notice. Absolutely. The superintendents will get notice. Administration will get notice. We are also more than happy to reach out to board membership as well. You will get some notice for sure.
Yeah, it's not going to be, oh, you need to go remote tomorrow. You're going to
You
give
will
us.
not hear it in the media. How about that?
Okay, so that gives us time to plan. Perfect.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, good.
All right, guys. Well, have a good holiday. All right, we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Jack.
Yep, bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, thank you for letting me get Jack squeezed in. I just can't imagine the amount of conversations that he has in a day. I know his weekend's probably consumed with it. So, we're just one entity in the county, and my hat's off to him. So, again, Jack, thank you for taking the time. Now, if I can, I want to move on to public participation on agenda items. If you have something that you'd like to say regarding an agenda item, now would be the time to address the board.
"29 years. I've never been up here before, so
Wanted to, first of all, say good evening. And I wanted to just, as you're aware, the Alexander Education Association approved a memorandum of understanding that I believe you will be discussing later and voting on later this evening. In that MOU, we approved a change to the work week from 5 days of in-person instruction down to 4 days of in-person instruction, with the extra 1 day being utilized by our teaching staff to plan and prepare for both in-class instruction and online instruction. The extra component of this MOU that has not been in place for all of our high school teachers in the past is the online instruction of 3 of our preps. I'm here to speak to you regarding this change. Several months ago, the board made the decision to come back to in-person instruction for all our students, with our staff also providing an online component for the students who did not feel comfortable coming to school in this pandemic. At the high school and junior high level, that online component was done on a voluntary supplemental basis by some of our staff, and other components were set aside through our Edison online system. Many of our staff picked up classes, but they did not pick up all of their course offerings. This was due to a lot of different reasons, depending on who the teacher was, subject matter, etc. In many cases, staff felt they could not satisfactorily teach in both environments at the same time. They really are 2 different jobs. This was something that I know Mrs. Baker spoke at length to you about, I don't know how many meetings ago. She discussed that. She had a nice presentation. With the implementation of the new MOU, many of our staff may see a great deal of anxiety and stress relief from the added day for planning and time to work on remote instruction. That's definitely something that could possibly happen. However, with the addition of preps at the high school, this might not be the case. It is most likely that teachers with a high number of preps and teachers in the areas of math and science may experience a greater level of difficulty and stress from this change. On a day-to-day basis, our teaching staff deals with four different groups of learners that include in-person, online, absent students, and quarantine students. And that's under our current scenario. Our teachers get drug in many directions due to these expectations, and it becomes quite a juggling act for many of our staff, especially considering the fact that many of our online, absent, and quarantine students are not fulfilling their responsibility of keeping up with their assignments that are being delivered through Google Classroom. A big thanks goes out to the students that are working hard and the parents that are there supporting them, because we can really see that happening for those kids that are succeeding in that remote environment. My biggest concerns with our agreement is that many will think that this MOU will allow for the in-class instruction and the remote instruction pieces to be identical. These are truly 2 different jobs and should be dealt with in that manner. However, our staff is continuing to try to do what is best for our kids and working diligently to prepare lessons and presentations that meet ODE indicators and the curricular requirements for both sets of learners. It's very difficult to replace in-class instruction and the nuances that occur in the daily classroom. The opportunity for students to Zoom is helpful, but immediate access to a teacher in the classroom is irreplaceable. This new MOU is not a cure-all that will fix all the difficulties, stress, and chaos that is occurring while the teachers try to navigate this pandemic and educate our students. But it may very well be a piece of the pie that makes things a lot better for a lot of our teachers. Only time's going to tell on that. Okay? The teachers do appreciate the opportunity to discuss solutions with the administration and the board. I know we set this MOU up for the entire semester, but I do hope everyone will be vigilant and look for other opportunities to make changes and improvements if we need to, especially if something comes that will help all parties that are in the situation. And obviously, the staff voted in support of the MOU, so that's why it's in front of you. So, but I had a few points I wanted to make sure I wanted to highlight and just, these are things that we are still dealing with, whether or not it's an MOU in place or not, and in the change of the working environment. So, and I think there are things that are stressful and could still be potential issues. And, will it make it better? It very well could. So, and I think it will help. It will help a lot of our staff members. But there's going to be a few that are going to take on a lot bigger burden, and it's going to be, for them, it's going to be very stressful too. So, it's kind of a yin or yang here. I mean, but I think our membership voted for the collective. What we thought would work the best for the group, not everybody, but for the group. So, that's where our MOU is. So, that's all I have. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Tom. I would like to thank Mr. Falber. We've had, I think, our initial meeting with the co-presidents of the union. I think it was around November 6th, and we tried to start being a little proactive, and at that time, 2 months out of what January might look like, and all of a sudden, 16th of December, here we are. So there's been a lot of back and forth, a lot of questions, meetings with the union representatives, and it is on the agenda later tonight, but and we'll discuss it further. But Tom, I want to thank you and Carla for your leadership as well in these meetings and representing your staff. I appreciate it. All right, is there anyone else that would like to speak on an agenda item, please? Okay, if not, we were supposed to have a special presentation for all of our fall sport recognitions, and due to the weather at the last minute, just for safety, we decided we're going to postpone that to January. Yes, ma'am? Okay. Duly noted. All right, we'll move to treasurer's recommendations. It's recommended that the Board of Education approve the minutes of the November 19th, 2020 regular special meeting.
So moved. Seconded.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Edis?
Yes.
Mr. Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes?
Yes.
And Mr. Collins?
Yes.
B, it's recommended the Board of Education approve the financial report for the month ending November 30, 2020.
Move.
Seconded.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Edis? Mr. Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Item C, it's recommended the Board of Education approve the following transfers. And again, these are our general school-wide pool fund monthly transfers.
So moved. Second.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Edis? Mr. Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
D, it's recommended the Board of Education accept the following donations, $229.83 from Ohio Pile.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Edis? Mr. Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Item E, it's recommended the Board of Education approve the following budget and purpose statements for fiscal year 2021 from the Drama Club.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Edis? Mr. Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
And item F, it's recommended the Board of Education authorize the treasurer to pay the following after-the-fact invoice to the Athens County Sheriff, $3,120.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Edis? Mr. Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the one that's posted online.
What is it? It's B. Do you have the most current?
No, Jenny Norris is for me.
Okay, here you go.
You got the one I gave you?
Yeah. Sorry, we're getting an agenda. I've got an old copy, apparently. Okay, so you guys keep track of me here because I'm working off of two different. We're good. All right, so under superintendent's recommendations, item A, it's recommended that the Board of Education approve the memorandum of understanding with ALEA regarding the instructional environment and work week for the second semester of the 2020-2021 school year.
Second.
Second. Okay. Fred, you got it? Okay. And before we take the vote, Aaron, just quickly for those who are listening at home and might not be aware, this is, again, something we've been working on for 2 months. We, as board members, at the administration, they heard from the teachers that honestly, the burden of teaching 5 days a week and servicing all of our remote kids was getting to be overwhelming. So we initiated that conversation with the union reps, and that's what's led us here today through some back and forth of what we think, and I stress think because it's as of today with the information we have, we think that this will work, and the MOU is for a 4-day in-person school day next year and this is for the second semester. Meaning until the end of the school year. Doesn't mean that it won't change, but I think our guiding principle here is we want to give some consistency for the rest of the school year. And like I said, I'm not saying that the 4-1 will never change, but as of right now, it's our intent, unless the health department recommends we shut down or we decide internally that remote is a good option. At least for now, we're planning on 4-1. And for the public listening, that's going to be in person Monday through Thursday. Is that right, Tom? Yes, everybody's shaking their head? Okay. And then Friday is remote learning for all students. And that's going to hopefully give our teachers enough of a break that they don't pull their hair out. It is a challenge to do both, as Mr. Falber said. And again, this is where we stand now. So we have, Lucy, you made the motion, Fred had a second. Okay, so I just wanted to let everybody know what we're voting on, just so everyone's clear.
Can you clarify a couple of things before we go into
Yeah,
vote?
Josh wants to clear. Yep.
The item number 6 in it, when it discusses 3 preps and then the option afterwards, I struggle with the idea of what preps are. I always connect them to, back in my day, it was college prep, but I don't think that's correct. They're more about classes that require distinct preparation. And I guess I'm kind of looking back at Tom to get a nod if I'm in line with that.
Yeah, Tom, you mind coming up and answer that for us? Because I have the same struggle of what a prep is, but I hear what you guys say, and then it sinks in for 30 seconds, and it's gone again.
You've gotten better.
Well, the water's not very muddy when you have a teacher that, let's say a science teacher or a math teacher that's doing physics as a class, pre-calc as a class, and chemistry. Those are 3 distinct preps.
Okay.
You know, myself, I have honors geometry, I have traditional geometry, that's 2 preps. We have honor, you know, we go to the English department, we have an honors English, we have a accelerated English, we have a traditional. Those are all 3 distinct classes.
Can you hold just a second?
So,
Just to draw that distinction, you mentioned that you have 2 preps, but you might teach that class multiple times in a given day, correct?
correct,
Okay.
correct. So, yeah, I have two honors classes and 4 traditional classes.
Okay, thank you.
You know, they might have in English, they might have 2 honors, 2 traditional, 2 accelerated. So, yeah, they,
So do we have a feeling for how many teachers will have more than 3 preps and will be faced with the opt-in, opt-out?
that would have to come from you.
Thank you, Tom. Tom's put a lot of work into this, and he's been wonderful to work with. The union has been awesome. Lots of good conversations. We looked at that number. We're averaging, there's probably 6 or 8 classes above and beyond the 3 preps, or 6 or 8 teachers that this will include, that will have more than 3 preps. Majority of our teachers have 3 preps or less.
And of those 6 or 8, how many preps would you guess were beyond 3? I'm trying to get a feeling for how many, I'm building up to how many students might be opted out, and what happens to those students under this. Mark's asking if you can, for
Microphone.
no good deed goes unpunished.
Yeah, Mrs. Matheny has what, 5 or 6 different preps, different classes. In VOAG, they, you know, the VOAG teacher, she has like 5 to 6 different classes. So, yeah, or electives, et cetera. I mean, but you know, I know the majority with 3 preps. 3 preps covers the majority of our kids at the high school level, and junior high level. It has to be pretty high.
Okay.
I mean,
So if we do have teachers opt out, what happens to those students in that class? Do they go to Edison, or is there an alternate that's planned?
If the teachers opt out, they will go to Edison. Some students have come back to school for 1 or 2 periods a day, or they can pick up that class next year. So they will need to work with the counselor to resolve that.
So the intent is to offer, if students wish to come in 1 or 2 classes a day to avoid Edison, that offer is going to be available
Yes,
to all students?
that's the way we're handling it right now.
It is not the way we're handling it right now. But knowing that it will be to all students in the future, that's helpful to know.
Lindy, you might know the answer to this question. I don't know why it rang a bell with me, but it really stuck, and then maybe Tom, you can answer this too. Is, you said the hardest thing right now with the handling both is the students not fulfilling their end of the bargain, if you want to call it, in the remote piece. What is being asked of teachers, or who's in charge of attempting to get those students connected? What is being done and who is doing it? I mean, if Lindy, you've got it too.
No,
I don't know.
I'd rather, Melinda, you speak from ground zero. You're in the trenches.
So basically, to start, that it's a teacher level issue, that the teachers contact parents and students. After that, we can talk to our building administrators. We have used our school truant officer, to contact students who have not been attending classes. The trouble is that it seems like there are some students who are selectively attending things. So to truly be truant, you really have to be not doing anything across the board, not just like skipping 1 class. Like there's some kids who have a 0 in a particular subject. So you can't, use that angle. So, really, I feel like we're using all of our resources. There just aren't a lot right now, so.
Has there been discussion of what resources would alleviate that burden?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of my big concerns, so I teach 12th graders. Dr. Dowd not always really talked a lot to us about, there was a large pressure on me, to make sure that I was getting students through. And so I think that part of the trouble with all of this situation too is we do have students on Edison and, seeing their completion, it's difficult. I spoke with Megan Carr last month, and I talked to her about the possibility of setting up conferences with individual parents. Because last year, I know that Megan did an awesome job of calling students down, like that were in the Edison classes, and they'd come back to my room and be scared, like you don't want the administrator to be calling you down. But if Mrs. Mowry's calling you for the 45th time, it doesn't have the same effect. So we talked about that possibility of pretty quickly after the break, setting up conferences with parents, because I don't know, when you see it on paper and when you have people telling you something, whether it's a Zoom or, in person. So she seemed really interested in that, and obviously that, especially in terms of graduation, is a big concern. So I'm not sure beyond that, like what has been going on. So I might back away.
Okay, Aaron, we got a motion and a second. Let's go.
Okay, Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Ms. Zetas? Mr. Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
I'm going to say yes, but I'd also like to make the request that once this goes into effect and we know how many folks have opted out, that we get an indication of that and how many students it may or may not affect. The numbers, yeah. I'm kind of looking, but I'm not seeing any response. Mrs. Douglas, can that be provided, please?
Can you say that again?
Once this is enacted, I'd like for us to know how many folks have, I don't want names of teachers, just want to know how many classes have opted out and how many students it may mean towards Edison, and then how many students we're going to be having in for the one or two at a time.
How many teachers opted out and how many children this affected? Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to B. So now that we've approved the MOU, it's the superintendent's recommendation that the Board of Education approve the following learning plan for the second semester beginning January 4th, 2021, per the MOU with ALEA. And that's in-person learning Monday through Thursday, remote learning for all students Friday.
So moved.
I'll second it since I was involved with it.
For the sake of clarification, we keep saying 4-1, but this is Plan B to stick with our menu, right? The one that we've approved?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Zetas? Mr. Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes?
Yes.
And Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Okay, item C, it's recommended that the Board of Education employ Jenny Norris as ticket taker for the 2020-21 school year, pending her meeting all state and local requirements.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Zetas? Mr. Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
D, it's recommended the Board of Education employ the following, pending their meeting all state and local requirements. Christina Miller for substitute food service and Levi Matthews, bus driver.
So moved.
Seconded.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Zetas? Mr. Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
E, it's recommended the Board of Education employ the following as long-term substitute teachers for the 2020-21 school year, pending their meeting all state and local requirements.
So moved.
Mr. Barnes?
Yes.
This also includes, these long-term substitutes will be on step 0 of the salary schedule of the ALEA contract beginning December 1st.
So moved.
Aaron, you'll get that in the minutes so that
Yep,
we have it.
I
Okay,
just put it
thank
down,
you.
yep.
Seconded.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Zetas? Mr. Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
F, it's recommended the Board of Education grant a continuing contract to Sheila Collins per the enclosed request.
So So moved.
Second.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Edis, Mr. Regan,
Yes.
Mr. Barnes,
Yes.
and Mr. Collins.
Yes.
G, it's recommended the Board of Education grant an unpaid leave of absence to John Healy effective January 4th through March 19th, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Edis, Mr. Regan,
Yes.
Mr. Barnes,
Yes.
and Mr. Collins.
Yes.
H, it's recommended the Board of Education accept the enclosed letter of resignation from Cheryl Russell effective December 31st, 2020.
So moved.
Seconded.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Edis, Mr. Regan,
Yes.
Mr. Barnes,
Yes.
Mr. Collins.
Yes.
I, it's recommended the Board of Education approve the memorandum of understanding with OAPSE regarding retire/rehire into secondary positions.
So moved.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Edis, Mr. Regan,
Yes.
Mr. Barnes,
Yes.
Mr. Collins.
Yes.
Item J, it's recommended the Board of Education authorize the treasurer to dispose of the enclosed list of items that are broken and/or obsolete.
So moved. Seconded.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Edis, Mr. Regan,
Yes.
Mr. Barnes,
Yes.
Mr. Collins.
Yes.
And item K, it's recommended the Board of Education approve the enclosed substitute aide and teacher list as recommended by the Athens Megs ESC Superintendent.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Edis, Mr. Regan,
Yes.
Mr. Barnes,
Yes.
Mr. Collins.
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, moving on to item 8 on the agenda, business initiated by board members. It's that time of year where we have a new slate of officers being voted on next meeting, so we need a president pro tem in the meantime. Now, if you'll have me, I'll.
Sure, I'll say it. You want to go ahead and be pro tem so that way we
Yeah,
get through the
that's
year?
fine.
Do we have to second or anything like that? Move, second, Jay, yay.
Yeah, if you want to make a second, and then we'll call roll.
I'll
Are you
second.
seconding it? Okay.
I'll second Josh's motion.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Edis, Mr. Regan,
Yes.
Mr. Barnes,
Abstain.
and Mr. Collins.
It'd be kind of fun to say no just for the, just for the record of it, but yes.
No. And then we have our organizational meeting by January 15th that we have to have. So in light of that, can we discuss when we're available before the 15th to have that meeting?
Yeah, probably ought to be a few days before with weather and whatnot this time of year.
Blake, what's your schedule? You still available on Wednesdays then?
Spring break at OU, so I'm good.
Spring break.
Yeah, they move spring break to that first week, so.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Spring break, January 2021.
So the 15th on Friday. Do we want to do it earlier in that week or before? What do you think, guys?
I'm completely free.
If you do it the 14th, that can just be a regular meeting
Would-
too, couldn't it, Aaron?
What do you think of that? Are you opposed to having?
Yeah, well, you actually set your regular meetings at the organizational meeting, so we can put what, we can have all of the regular items that regular business on that same day.
13th?
What I'm looking
Mhm.
at, that's a Wednesday, and that keeps it within the
Yep.
Wednesday parameter, and then we just go
Perfect,
from there.
thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Aaron, we had a good suggestion. Let's just have it on Wednesday, the 13th, and then that gives us 2 backup days in case weather is not well. So we will have the organizational meeting January 13th. And hopefully that's also going to sub as well as for our regular meeting.
Do we have to move on that?
Yes, please.
We should.
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs. Zetas, Mr. Regan,
Yes.
Mr. Barnes,
Yes.
and Mr. Collins.
Yes.
Do we have any board reports? It's next. It's coming. It's not on there, but it's coming.
And just for clarification, the organizational meeting, do you want to have that start at 7 o'clock as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, hearing no board reports, we do have someone patiently waiting to address the board on a non-agenda item. So, Mark, do we still have them on? Okay. Is this Lucy?
Hi, good evening.
Hi, Lucy.
I want to thank you for having us on. I'm Lucy Bucher, and I'm talking tonight on behalf of myself and my husband, Brian Bucher, and we have 2 children in the Alexander system. We want to come before the board tonight to publicly express a concern regarding the educational experience of virtual students as compared to in-person students over the past quarter. We've discussed this with the faculty and administration at the high school, as well as the district representation, including the members of this board, and we feel it is important to raise it in a public forum so that other families might be informed. First and foremost, I want to say that as parents, we have been really happy with the at-home learning curriculum and the participation that's been afforded by the majority of our faculty members for our students. When the decision was made earlier in the semester to allow Alexander faculty to do virtual teaching as well as their in-person responsibilities, we were very excited. The majority of we have a junior in high school, the majority of their classes were being offered virtual by their Alexander teachers, and we were quite pleased with that. During the first several weeks of the quarter, our student expressed concerns to us that there were differences in how the in-classroom content was relayed to virtual students in some classes versus others. Namely, one of their core classes that's required to graduate only had a Zoom 1 day a week, and it was a Wednesday. And it seemed like there was knowledge expected of them on quizzes and exams that was not thoroughly provided in the reading content, nor in that 1 day a week Zoom. We emailed the faculty members. They admitted that much of the learning in that particular class was not through textbooks or reading, but through in-classroom lecture and discussion. We escalated this concern because our students' grade was suffering, and that had been excellent during the first quarter when everybody was virtual. In doing so, we learned that the administration had required the faculty to only utilize 1 Zoom day per week at a minimum. And therefore, the structure of this class was not violating any curricular guidelines. Our inquiries to the high school and district administration did not result in an acknowledgement of the inequity that was being propagated to all the students and families who have chosen to do virtual learning. Instead, we were told that the experience could never be equal, and we should utilize special accommodations allowed for our child due to a disability to try and address the inequity. These suggestions and actions have led us to understand that there are key members of this school district's administration who do not understand the basic differences between equality and equity, nor how systemic structures can propagate inequities for entire groups of people. Equality is a state in which all individuals or groups are afforded the same resource. Equity is a state of tailoring resources to each individual or group so that they may have similar outcomes. If 2 people want to see over a fence, but they are of differing heights, equal treatment would be to provide each person a single box to stand on, even if that did not result in the shorter person being able to see. Equitable or fair treatment would be to give a taller box to the shortest person so both people could see over the fence. Equal resources would be for all students to be present in the classroom daily. Of course, this is not a possibility. Of course, the learning structure this year can never achieve equality. We've not asked for that. But to strive for equity would be to try and ensure that the content relayed, discussed, and expounded upon within the classroom is available to all of the students, regardless of if they are virtual or in person. That's what we're asking for. And we're asking for it for all students who have chosen virtual learning, not just our student. The virtual students who are only in one Zoom a Wednesday every week this quarter had 6 classes, while the in-person students had over 30. Each class is 45 minutes, and that is a difference of 4.5 hours of total student-teacher contact time versus more than 22 hours. You cannot tell me that this setup results in equitable education, and you cannot tell me that this can be remedied with an individualized education plan. We will continue to work with the administration on our own, but we wanted to make this complaint public because we have been disappointed thus far and feel other families should be informed. Again, we would like to express that we have been overwhelmingly happy with the structure of 90% of the virtual learning offered by Alexander faculty, and we're disappointed in the response of the administration to our concerns, that their policies are potentiating inequity and their insistence that this is an issue related to our child's physical disability. We thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, Lucy. Okay, we're going to do an executive session real quick, but just a reminder, so January 13th at 7 will be our next board meeting. We will go to executive session. We do not plan to discuss anything further after this. So with that, I'll have a motion to enter executive session to discuss the employment of a public employee.
Hey, Jay, is it worth mentioning that vote back on B is the acknowledgement of the kind of the conversation that has been going around throughout all of the different communities, that we plan on being back in person under a 4-1 situation in the new year?
I didn't hear half of the first part of what you said.
Back in Superintendent B, that vote beginning January 4th, 2021 per MOU and with the ALEA, that was our intent, that we will start back in person.
Yeah, so if there's any confusion out there, when we voted on item B, we will return to school January 4th on a 4-1 schedule, unless between now and then, the health department guides us differently. Is that?
That's
clear?
exactly what I was.
That clear?
That is exactly what I wanted to, in case
Okay.
somebody was out there waiting to hear us talk about something, because
Yeah, so for everyone listening, if you've got a child, and like I said, the plan is, this is going to be the plan for now until the end of the school year, is a 4-1. And so starting January 4th, we'll welcome the kiddos back in the building on a 4-1 schedule.
We would be at the point at which we'd be asking folks if they feel the need to change from in-person to remote or vice versa. Is there a date before January 4th and a method that we need to inform people that they need to contact the school?
So if someone wants to switch between in-person, remote in-person, is there a deadline or?
in the elementary received the 18th. That was at the elementary level.
What's that?
December 18th was the elementary level. That was sent
Is that
out.
what the admin at the elementary requested?
Yes.
Okay.
And if you wanted to change, you were to contact the elementary office.
Does that match up with what you understand?
Yes, that is my understanding also. We were waiting to get through tonight, and then it'll go up on the website, that if you wish to change, get a hold of the junior high, high school, or elementary office, or your guidance counselor.
That was the elementary, you said, Blake?
That was the elementary.
Is that the same for the high school? And junior high, sorry.
So is it also safe to say, I mean, that is the elementary's request is the 18th, but now that we've voted, the high school will be giving information on what?
Yes, the
information
high
they want.
school, now that we have voted, we know the direction that we are going in. The high school will put out information, and most likely it'll be on our website, all call, text message, and they will set the date if you would like to change to let them know. They will need to work with the high school office and their counselor.
And are we still asking for a default 9-week commitment from these folks, or is the commitment now intended to be for the full semester as well?
I will have to look into that answer. Right now, we are working with parents one-on-one. As COVID changes, parents' wishes change also.
That's fair. I would ask then whatever is sent out to everybody in the all-call blast to indicate how long the commitment is. It's just one of the basics we should be providing people with.
I'd hate to drag this on, but I just feel it, I would feel remiss if I don't make the mention of it, as laid out by Jack Pepper quite clearly, that there is calculated risk going on with, especially with the gatherings, probable gatherings over the holiday season. The choices that you make do impact our school and do impact our teachers, your children's peers, and their families. So the choices you make, they do know that you affect the entire community, and make them wisely. And don't be afraid if you take those choices, you do have the responsibility to make the right choice in self-quarantine. And nothing says that you can't self-quarantine for that first week if you took those riskier behaviors in return. So just make the right choices, and know that those choices have effect on the entire community and our ability to stay open like we have been with, I should say, with success. We want to continue that success, but that, again, depends on everybody. So thank you. And happy holidays.
Good. So did we even get a first and a second? No? All right, I'll make a motion that we go into executive session to discuss the employment of a public employee.
I'll second.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mrs. Udis? Mr. Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Fred, go home.
No, not that way. I just meant tall. I'm a short dude. Where'd I go with that?
All right, it is 9:51. Call the meeting back to order in regular session. There's no other business. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Mrs. Yedis? Mr. Regan?
Yes.
Mr. Barnes?
Yes.
And Mr. Collins?
Yep.
Happy New Year. Good night.